Man, I still can barely wrap my head around it. After 6 solid months, I mean 6 months of just non-stop grinding, practically no sleep, and meetings that felt like they'd never end, I did it. Jake Miller. I finally sealed the deal. A $15 million merger for Miller and Hayes Investments. It was the kind of win you dream about. The one that actually puts your name on the map, you know? The office was just buzzing that afternoon, pure energy. My team was swarming around me, happy and loud, like a bunch of bees that just found a huge field of flowers. Someone popped a bottle of champagne. And yeah, some of that fizzy stuff sprayed right onto my jacket, but honestly, I didn't even flinch. Couldn't care less. Laughter was everywhere, glasses clinked, and my head of finance, David, slapped me on the back so hard I nearly dropped my drink. "You pulled it off, Jake! You're a damn legend!" he yelled over all the noise. I grinned, soaking it all in, trying to just be in that moment. But deep down, all I really wanted was to get out of there. The victory felt incredible. Yeah, it really did. But the only person I truly wanted to share it with was the one person who mattered most in the world to me. My wife, Rebecca. She'd been my rock, or at least I thought she had, through the absolute chaos of getting this deal done. I kept picturing her waiting at home, that warm, easy smile of hers lighting up our quiet living room. And I just knew that's where I needed to be more than anywhere else. By the time I finally pulled the car into our driveway, the sun was just starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky all these crazy shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, but I barely noticed. I just grabbed the heavy duffel bag off the passenger seat. I told myself, and honestly believed it, that it was just paperwork, a stand-in for the real cash that was still totally safe and locked up tight in the company vault. I definitely didn't want to deal with moving that kind of money tonight. The vault could wait until morning. I stepped inside, the house feeling strangely quiet for a second, and called out, "Rebecca, hey, I'm home." She appeared from the kitchen, her dark hair kind of messy, tied up in a bun, wearing that soft gray sweater she knew I loved. "Hey there, big shot," she teased, her voice light and playful, just like I remembered. I held up the duffel bag, feeling a little swell of pride even with the paperwork inside. "We did it," I said, maybe a little breathless. "The merger's officially done. $15 million in the bank." Her eyes went wide, and she let out this little squeal, throwing her arms around me right there in the hallway. The familiar smell of her lavender shampoo hit me, and for just a moment, just that perfect moment, everything felt exactly right. We sat on the couch, her legs curled up under her like she always did, and I started telling her all about the day. The crazy final meeting, how the other side totally caved right at the last second, how I just bluffed my way through their final counteroffer. She listened, really listened, nodding along, her hand resting gently on mine. "You're incredible, Jake," she said, and looking at her, hearing her say it, I honestly believed her completely. Then, maybe without thinking too hard about it, just wanting it out of the way, I handed her the duffel bag. The weight of it made her grunt a little when she took it. "Just hang on to this for tonight, okay?" I said, trying to play it cool, like it was no big deal at all. "I'll take it to the vault first thing tomorrow. I'm just too wiped out to mess with it now." She gave me that sweet smile of hers, the one that always made me feel like I could trust her with absolutely anything in the world. "Of course," she said, and leaned in to kiss my cheek. Her lips were soft, and I felt this wave of warmth spread through me, washing away the exhaustion of the day for a second. She got up, carrying the bag, and walked over to the hall closet. tucking it away behind some coats. "Safe and sound," she called back, and I just chuckled, sinking deeper into the couch, feeling completely relaxed. The rest of the night was exactly what I'd needed. Simple, easy, us. We ordered pizza, opened a bottle of wine, and watched some mindless TV show about people renovating houses. I kept stealing glances at her, just thinking about how incredibly lucky I was. 3 years married, and she could still make my heart skip a beat just by being herself. Yeah, we'd had our rough patches lately. Arguments about my insane hours at work, her feeling neglected, feeling like I was always checked out even when I was home. But tonight felt like a total reset, a real celebration of us, not just some big business deal. Around 11, I let out a huge yawn, my eyes feeling heavy from the longest day ever. "Man, I'm beat," I said, standing up and stretching. Rebecca nodded, starting to gather up the empty pizza box. "Go on to bed," she said, softly. "I'll clean up down here." I walked over and kissed her forehead, letting my lips linger there for a second, just soaking in her closeness. Then I trudged upstairs. As I brushed my teeth, my mind was still buzzing a little. The merger, the money bag, the future. Everything just seemed to be falling right into place. I climbed into bed, the sheets cool and crisp against my skin, and drifted off to sleep, already imagining tomorrow's headlines about my big win. Rebecca would be so proud. I told myself she'd be right there with me, cheering me on, celebrating our life together. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have known while I was lying there, drifting off, dreaming of our future, was that Rebecca was already planning something else entirely. That duffel bag wasn't just a placeholder to her. Not at all. It was a ticket. And I just handed it over to her without a second thought, trusting her completely, like I always had, like I always would. The champagne buzz from the office, the warm glow of the night we'd just shared, it totally blinded me. I didn't hear her footsteps downstairs later, didn't notice the quiet rustle as she packed a bag for herself. I didn't feel the subtle shift in the air, the way the house seemed to hold its breath around me. All I saw was her smile from earlier, that soft kiss on my cheek, the easy way she'd tucked the bag away like it was absolutely nothing. How could I have suspected a damn thing? She was my wife, my partner, my Rebecca, and by morning, she'd be gone, leaving me with nothing but the echo of a laugh and a lesson I knew I'd never, ever forget. The morning sun hit my face like a physical slap, pulling me abruptly out of a deep, dreamless sleep. I rolled over automatically, expecting to feel Rebecca's warmth next to me, but the other side of the bed was just cold. The sheets looked untouched. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the sleep, thinking maybe she'd just got up early to make coffee or something. "Rebecca?" I called out, my voice rough and scratchy from sleep. No answer. The house felt way too quiet, empty, like it was holding its breath, just like it had last night. A weird tight knot started twisting in my gut, but I tried to push it down. "She's probably just out for a walk," I told myself. "It's Saturday. No reason to panic. Not yet." I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet hitting the cool, hardwood floor, and shuffled into the bathroom. Her toothbrush was still there, dry as a bone. That knot in my stomach tightened a little more. Downstairs, the living room looked pretty much the same as when we left it. The pizza box was gone. The wine glasses were in the sink. But yeah, something was definitely off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table and dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Rebecca. Leave a message." Her cheerful voice chirped out, and it felt like a punch. I hung up, frowning, and tried again. Same thing. That knot in my stomach felt like a rock now. "Come on, Rebecca," I muttered, starting to pace toward the kitchen, feeling a little shaky. That's when I saw it. A single sheet of paper on the counter, her elegant handwriting staring back at me. It felt like another punch, right to the chest this time. I picked it up, my hand actually trembling a little, and started reading the words she'd left behind. "Thanks for the money, Jake. I'm starting over with Marcus. Good luck starting from scratch." For a second I just stood there, the paper shaking in my grip. My brain literally couldn't process it. Marcus? Who the hell was Marcus? And the money? What money? Then it hit me. Like a freight train going at full speed. The duffel bag. I dropped the note like it was on fire and bolted for the hall closet, yanking the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. The coats were still there, hanging neatly. But the bag? It was gone. My heart was pounding. In my ears, a wild, frantic rhythm like a drum solo in my head. She'd taken it. She'd actually taken the bag and run off with some guy named Marcus. I stumbled back, my legs feeling suddenly weak, and leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. "No way," I whispered to myself, shaking my head. "No damn way." Then, out of nowhere, this weird sound bubbled up in my throat. A laugh, a single sharp bark that echoed in the too quiet house. It wasn't funny. Not even a little bit. But it was so completely absurd, so unbelievable, that I just couldn't help it. Of course she'd gone. Of course she'd played me like this. Rebecca, with her sweet smiles and soft kisses, had been plotting this the whole damn time. I'd handed her the bag, thinking it was just for safekeeping, for convenience. And she'd seen her chance. She'd taken it. I ran a hand through my hair, starting to pace the living room now, my mind racing, jumping all over the place. How long had she been planning this? Was Marcus some guy she'd met at the gym, at the grocery store, at one of those fancy charity events she always dragged me to? I didn't even know who he was. And yet, here he was, apparently stealing my wife and what he thought was my money. But here's the thing. The really, truly messed up thing. She didn't know the half of it. That laugh came again, louder this time, because the joke was on her. The bag she'd taken? It wasn't the real deal at all. I sank onto the couch, putting my head in my hands for a second, and just let the truth settle over me like a warm, heavy blanket. The real $15 million was still sitting pretty in the company vault, locked up tighter than a drum behind steel and codes that only I had access to. What I'd given her last night was a decoy, a heavy duffel bag stuffed with old training binders, fake financial papers I'd had mocked up, and one little something extra I'd thrown in with Ben's help months ago, a GPS chip. Tiny, unnoticeable. Tucked deep into the lining of the bag, Rebecca thought she'd won. Thought she'd cleaned me out and skipped town with her new boyfriend, leaving me with nothing. But she had no idea that I'd actually seen this coming. Not the details, not Marcus, not the note, but the cracks. The big, widening cracks in us. We'd been off for months. She'd stopped asking about my day. Started picking fights about nothing. My late nights, my focus on work. I just chalked it up to stress from the merger. Told myself we'd get through it after the deal was done, that things would go back to normal. But looking back, the signs were all there. The way she'd linger on her phone for ages, the vague answers when I asked where she'd been. I just trusted her because I loved her. because I couldn't even imagine her turning on me like this. And yet here we were. I picked up her note again, rereading it, letting the words just sink in. Twist the knife. Good luck starting from scratch, she'd written. Like she'd left me completely empty-handed. Oh, Rebecca, I thought to myself, the bitterness rising. You have no idea what you've actually walked into. I grabbed my phone again, but this time I dialed Ben Hayes, my best friend, and the sharpest legal mind I knew. He picked up on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. Jake? Man, it's what, 7 in the morning? You okay? I didn't waste any time with pleasantries. She's gone, man, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Took the bag and ran off with some guy named Marcus. There was a pause on the other end. A long one. Then Ben let out a low whistle. Damn, he said. She actually did it. I could almost hear him sitting straight up in bed, already switching into full-on strategist mode. You're not freaking out, though, he said, a note of surprise in his voice. Why? I smirked a little, leaning back against the couch cushions. Because she took the bait, I said. The decoy's in play. Ben laughed then, a real belly laugh that actually made me feel a tiny bit lighter in that moment. You're a genius. You know that? He said. An absolute cold-blooded genius. Okay, what's the next move? I stood up, walking over to the window and peering out at the quiet street. The houses still dark. Somewhere out there, Rebecca and this Marcus guy were probably celebrating, probably thinking they'd just hit the jackpot. We let her run, I said, my voice firm now, the plan clicking into place in my head. The GPS is active. I'll fire up the laptop and see where she's headed. You get your team ready. We're not chasing her, Ben. We're watching her. Ben was quiet for a second. You sure you're okay? He asked, his tone serious again. This was your wife we're talking about. I swallowed hard, the sting of her betrayal still feeling incredibly raw. She stopped being my wife the second she wrote that note, I told him, the words feeling true as I said them. Now she's just a thief who doesn't even know she's caught. I hung up and grabbed my laptop from the kitchen table, powering it on. The GPS tracking software was already installed. A little favor from Ben's tech guy months ago when we set this up. A blinking dot appeared on the screen. It was moving. Fast, too fast for a car. She was on a plane, maybe, or a train. I didn't know yet, but I'd find out soon enough. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitterness of it matching exactly how I felt inside, and settled in to watch the screen. Rebecca thought she'd played me for a fool, thought she'd gotten away with it all. But she didn't know the game had just started. And this time, I was holding all the cards. I just sat there at the kitchen table, the laptop screen glowing in front of me, that tiny blinking dot just taunting me as it moved across the map. Rebecca was gone. And even with the plan in motion, even knowing she'd taken the fake money, I still couldn't quite wrap my head around it. The coffee in my mug was already getting cold, but I didn't even care. I was too busy staring at that GPS signal, watching her run off with that decoy bag and whoever this Marcus guy was. My phone buzzed on the table next to me. Ben's name lit up the screen. I picked it up without even a hello. She took the bait, I said, my voice calmer than I would have expected it to be. Ben's laugh crackled through the line, loud and easy. I knew it, man. I freaking knew it, he said. You sure know how to pick 'em, don't you? I actually smirked a little despite the cold ache in my chest. Yeah, well, this one's definitely on me, I said. But she's not getting away with it. Not like this. Ben was more than just my best friend. He was the guy who'd been with me through every messy step of building Miller and Hayes Investments from the ground up. He'd helped me plan this little trap months ago, way back when I first started noticing Rebecca pulling away, getting distant. It wasn't her leaving that I predicted exactly, not the details of how, just the gut feeling that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't who I thought she was, and she might try something stupid. "So, what's the deal with the bag?" Ben asked, his tone shifting to business now. I leaned back in my chair, glancing out the window, at the empty driveway where her car used to sit just yesterday. "It's exactly like we set it up," I said. "Old training binders, those fake financial documents, and that GPS chip you got from your guy. The real cash? The 15 million? Still locked up tight in the vault. She's got nothing but a pile of paper and a tracking device." He let out a low whistle. "Man, you're cold, Jake, ice cold. I love it." I didn't feel cold, though. Not yet. I just felt raw. Like someone had just ripped a bandage off a wound I didn't even realize I had until that moment. Rebecca's note was still lying on the counter, her handwriting looping across the page like a signature on a confession. I picked it up again, rereading it for probably the third time that morning. "Thanks for the money, Jake. I'm starting over with Marcus." Marcus. The name burned in my brain, a faceless shadow I couldn't pin down. Was he some slick-talking guy she'd met behind my back? A co-worker I'd never heard of? A friend I'd shaken hands with at some party without ever knowing his connection to her? I didn't know. And that uncertainty? It made it so much worse. "Jake? You still there?" Ben's voice snapped me back to the moment. "Yeah," I said, tossing the note back onto the counter. "Just thinking, where's she headed? The dot's moving fast." I heard him tapping on his end of the line, probably pulling up the same tracking software. "Looks like an airport vector," he said after a minute. "Private jet, maybe." "She's not wasting any time." A private jet? That actually hit me harder than the note, almost. She'd planned this. She'd really planned it out. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment fling where they just grabbed what they could and hopped on a bus. She'd lined up an escape route, a partner, a whole damn life without me. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep the anger from just boiling over. "Good," I said, the word tight in my throat. "Let her think she's flying high. We'll see how far that gets her." Ben and I had built this plan like a chess game, piece by piece. It started months ago during one of our late-night strategy sessions at the office. I'd been venting to him about Rebecca, about how distant she'd gotten, how it felt like she just didn't care anymore about the merger that was literally eating my life. Ben had leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of whiskey, and said, "Man, you trust her too much. What if she's not who you think she is?" I'd laughed it off back then, told him he was being paranoid, that Rebecca would never. But the seed was planted. A week later, I asked him to help me set up a contingency. Just in case. We filled a duffel bag with junk, made it look totally legit with some forged documents, and added that GPS chip. I honestly never thought I'd actually have to use it. It was just insurance. A safety net for a marriage that I didn't want to admit was maybe already fraying beyond repair. Now here I was, sitting in the quiet house, feeling morbidly grateful for Ben's cynicism. I stood up, pacing the kitchen again, my bare feet slapping against the tile floor. The house felt too big without her, too empty. I could still smell her lavender shampoo lingering in the air, like a ghost mocking me from the hallway closet. "What's the next step?" Ben asked, pulling me back to the moment. I stopped by the sink, staring at the wine glasses from last night. Hers still had a faint lipstick stain on the rim. "We track her," I said, my voice steady now. "Find out where she lands, who this Marcus guy is, and then we tighten the net." Ben grunted in approval. "You're not gonna let her off easy, are you?" I thought about that for a second. About the woman I'd loved for 3 years. The one I'd built this life with. "She made her choice," I said, the words feeling heavy and final. "Now she lives with it." The truth was, this wasn't just about revenge. Not entirely. Rebecca and we'd been struggling for a while. And yeah, I'd ignored it. Buried myself in work, instead of facing it head on. The late nights, the arguments, the way she'd look at me sometimes, like I was a complete stranger. I'd seen the signs deep down, but I just didn't want to believe them. I convinced myself that the merger would fix us, that once I had some time, again we'd be okay. But betrayal? That was a line I never expected her to cross. Not like this. Not with a smug little note and a bag she thought was full of my money. I turned back to the laptop, the dot still blinking, moving farther away from me with every second that passed. She thought she'd won. Thought she'd left me completely broken and empty. But she didn't know that I'd actually been ready for this. Not for her specifically leaving, but for someone, somewhere, trying to take me down. "Ben," I said, my voice firm now, back in control. "Get your tech guy on this. I want updates every hour minimum. And pull whatever you can on a Marcus. Anybody." She might have crossed paths with friends, colleagues, anybody who fits the description. Anything at all. He didn't miss a beat. "Will do. You gonna be okay over there?" I looked around the kitchen, at the life we'd built that was now just a shell. "Yeah," I lied. "I'll be fine." I hung up and sat back down, my eyes locked on that dot. It was my lifeline now, my only way to figure out what the hell had actually happened to my marriage. I didn't know who Marcus was, or how long Rebecca had been lying to me, but I'd find out. And when I did, I'd make damn sure she realized that the bag wasn't the only decoy in this game. I was playing a game she didn't even know she'd stepped into. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and just watched the screen. The dot kept moving, carrying Rebecca and whatever she thought was her new life farther and farther from me. Let her run, I thought. Let her think she's free, because every mile she went, every smug laugh she shared with Marcus, was just another step deeper into the trap I'd already set. She'd find out soon enough. The money wasn't real, and neither was her victory. I took a sip of the cold coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste, and settled in. It was going to be a long haul. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I just couldn't take my eyes off that damn blinking dot on the laptop screen. It felt like Rebecca was deliberately taunting me from thousands of miles away, charting her course across the map. The kitchen was dark now. The sun had set hours ago, and the only light in the room came from the glow of the screen and the low, quiet hum of the fridge. Ben had called back about an hour ago, his voice sharp, with the first real piece of solid news. "She's on a private jet, Jake," he'd said. "Headed for Montenegro. And get this, Julian just tagged himself at some ridiculous luxury villa on Instagram. The idiots aren't even trying to hide." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples, a bitter, humorless smile tugging at my lips. "Montenegro, huh? Fancy. Guess she figures she's living it up on my dime. Or so she thinks anyway." Ben chuckled on the other end. "You're taking this better than I expected, honestly." I didn't tell him the truth. That inside I was an absolute mess. A tangled knot of anger and hurt that I couldn't even begin to untie. Instead, I just said, let them enjoy it for a little while. I want them to feel comfortable before the fall. Rebecca had always been really good at this, you know. Charming people. Making them feel like they were the center of her world, even if it was just for a few minutes. I remembered the night we met, 3 years ago now, at some big investors' gala downtown. I was there, working the room, trying to schmooze clients, feeling totally out of my depth among all the fancy suits and sparkling dresses. Then she just walked up. A glass of champagne in her hand, her dark hair falling in waves over one shoulder. You look like you'd rather be absolutely anywhere else on earth, she'd said, her voice smooth as silk, a hint of amusement in her eyes. I laughed, totally caught off guard, and she smiled. That smile. The one that just hooked me right then and there. She was magnetic. The kind of woman who could talk her way into anything, make anyone believe anything she wanted them to. By the end of the night, I had her number. 6 months later, we were married. I honestly thought I'd won the lottery. Now I saw it for what it probably was all along. She'd been playing me from the start, sizing me up like a mark. I poured myself a glass of whiskey from the bottle I kept on the counter. The burn of it felt steadying as I started pacing the living room. The GPS dot hadn't moved for a while over the Atlantic. Probably means they're mid-flight. Ben's tech guy had confirmed the jet's trajectory, and I could just picture her up there, sipping something expensive, laughing with Marcus like they'd just pulled off the heist of the century. The thought made my stomach twist. Who was this guy? Some smooth-talking con artist she'd hooked up with behind my back? A lover she'd been hiding for months? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew I'd get them. For now, all I could do was wait. And that waiting? It was absolutely driving me crazy. I sank onto the couch, the same spot where we'd sat just last night. Her legs tucked up under her. That duffel bag sitting right there between us. She'd been so convincing. Her excitement about the merger, the way she'd kissed my cheek when I handed her the bag. Safe and sound, she'd said, tucking it away in the closet. I'd bought it. Every word. Because I wanted so desperately to believe in us. But looking back now, it was all just too perfect, too polished. She'd known exactly what to say, how to play the part of the loving, supportive wife, all while she was plotting her exit strategy. And me? I'd been too tired, too wrapped up in my own victory, my own ego to see through it. The whiskey burned my throat again. I set the glass down hard on the coffee table. "You're a fool, Jake," I muttered to myself. "A damn fool." Ben's voice echoed in my head again. His update about the burner phone we'd secretly slipped into the bag. It wasn't just the GPS chip giving us eyes on her whereabouts. That phone was encrypted. A little technical trick we'd cooked up to monitor her calls, her texts, basically anything she did once she landed. "She's got no idea," Ben had said, almost giddy about it. "They'll use it, and we'll hear everything." I'd just nodded along then, impressed by his foresight, his thoroughness. But now, sitting here alone in the dark house, it felt less like a win and more like a lifeline. I needed to know what she was saying, what she was thinking. Was she laughing at me, bragging about how easy it was to take me down, or did she feel anything at all? Guilt, maybe? Doubt? I doubted it. Rebecca didn't do doubt. She was all in, always had been. I thought about Montenegro, that villa Marcus was flaunting online. I pulled up his Instagram on my phone, scrolling through the post Ben had mentioned. There it was, a photo of this sprawling White House with a huge pool, the ocean glittering in the background. New beginnings, the caption read, tagged with some location in Budva. The guy had dark hair, a super cocky grin, and a tan that just screamed money, or at least the illusion of it. I didn't recognize him at all. But that didn't mean much, did it? Rebecca apparently had a whole life I knew absolutely nothing about. I tossed the phone onto the cushion next to me, my hands clenching into fists. They were probably there by now, unpacking that bag, dreaming up their next move. Let them, I thought. Let them dig their hole deeper. The plan was simple, and it was mine, all mine. Ben had helped with the details, the tech side, the legal angles, but the core idea? That came from me, born out of those late-night doubts I'd buried for months. I told myself it was just paranoia, that Rebecca would never betray me like that, but I'd set up the decoy anyway. Just in case, now it was paying off in the most twisted way possible. The bag wasn't just a trick. It was a test. And she had failed it spectacularly. I stood up again, walking to the window, staring out at the dark, empty street. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel utterly alone in the world. I wondered if she'd ever loved me, even for a minute, or if it had all been one long con, 3 years of smiles and promises just to get to this moment. The whiskey wasn't helping anymore. It just made the questions louder in my head. I went back to the laptop, refreshing the GPS tracker. The dot was still static. They'd landed. Definitely. Montenegro. A place we'd talked about visiting once, back when we were happy. Or when I thought we were happy. "We'll go someday," she'd said, curled up next to me on this very couch, flipping through a travel magazine. Sun, history, a little adventure. I'd kissed her then, promised her the world. Now she was there. Without me. With him. And I was here, sitting in the dark, plotting her downfall. I closed my eyes for a second, took a deep breath. Then I opened them and leaned in closer to the screen. Ben, I knew, was already working, getting the wheels in motion for operations. Mirage. Harper was probably already on a plane or getting her team prepped. Things were happening. I took another sip of the warm whiskey, the bitter taste grounding me slightly. Rebecca thought she'd played me for a fool, thought she'd left me broken and ruined. But she didn't know the game had just begun, and I was going to watch her lose everything she thought she'd won. Let her run, let her celebrate. The Blue Mirage Villa, just like its name, was a beautiful lie, and I was about to watch it crumble. This wasn't over, not even close. I watched that live feed from the Blue Mirage Villa until the screen just went black. Harper's voice cut through the quiet in my headphones one last time. "We're out, Jake. Signal given. It's done." I closed the laptop slowly, the silence in my living room swallowing me whole. The beer was still warm in my hand. I hadn't touched it since the moment Rebecca had opened that bag and read my note. Her face, pale, stunned, completely unraveling, kept replaying in my mind. And Marcus's face, too, his cocky grin just twisting into pure panic as the guests, these wealthy, sophisticated people, turned on them like a pack of wolves. It should have felt good, seeing them fall apart like that. It should have felt like a triumph, like sweet, sweet revenge. But it didn't. Not really. It just felt final. Like the very last thread of whatever we had, whatever we were, had just snapped right there in Montenegro, thousands of miles away. From me, the plan had worked even better than I'd dared to hope. Harper and Ben had played their parts perfectly. Harper as the smooth-talking venture capitalist, Ben as the quiet, observant associate, both just subtly feeding the chaos without ever breaking cover. When Rebecca pulled out those ridiculous training binders and my note, the room had just imploded. "What is this?" one guy had barked, loud enough for the mic to catch. "You said you had funds." Marcus had tried to laugh it off, stammering something about a mix-up, a misunderstanding. But Rebecca just stood there, clutching my crumpled note like it was burning her fingers. The gray-haired investor stormed off, muttering loudly about fraud, and the others followed, leaving the party in shambles in minutes. Harper had given the signal then, a quiet nod to Ben, and they just slipped out as the local police cars started rolling up the drive. Ben had tipped them off earlier with an anonymous call, just a few key details to pique their interest. I didn't even need to see the actual arrest to know what happened next. I stood up, stretching my stiff legs, and walked into the kitchen. The clock on the microwave blinked 1:23 a.m. Hours had passed since the feed started, but it felt like it had only been minutes. I poured the warm, untouched beer down the sink. It tasted like failure anyway, and grabbed a glass of cold water instead, trying to wash away the bitter taste in my mouth, in my soul. Rebecca and Marcus thought they'd pulled off a simple heist, a quick grab and run. But they'd tried to pitch a scam to a room full of people who didn't mess around, who had resources, who made calls. The fake documents, the training binders, my note, it wasn't just humiliation. It was concrete evidence, enough to get the local police involved. Ben had made sure of that, looping in a contact he had in Podgorica, who'd been waiting for the green light. This wasn't about me dragging her back, arresting her myself. It was about letting her face the consequences of the choices she had made. I leaned against the counter, staring at the spot where her note had been earlier in the day. I'd crumpled it up, tossed it in the trash hours ago, but the words still echoed in my head. "Thanks for the money, Jake. Good luck starting from scratch." She'd wanted me to feel that, to truly believe she'd left me with absolutely nothing. But she didn't know the bag was a decoy. Didn't know I'd been 2-3 steps ahead the entire time. The real 15 million was still safe in the vault. And now? Now she was the one with nothing. Stuck in a foreign country, her big, elaborate plan blown to pieces right in front of her eyes. I took a slow sip of water, the cold shocking my system a little, and just wondered what she was thinking right now. Was she cursing me? Blaming Marcus? Or was she just sitting there, wherever they'd taken her, finally realizing the magnitude of what she'd lost? I shook my head, pushing the thought away. There was no point in wondering. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine, long before tonight. My phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Ben. "You still up?" he asked when I answered, his voice rough, tired. "Yeah," I said, walking back towards the couch. "Just watched the whole thing go down. You and Harper, you guys were flawless, man." He laughed, a tired but satisfied sound. "Man, you should have seen it in person." When she read that note, I honestly thought she was going to faint right there. Marcus, he tried to make a run for it, actually tripped over a chair. Made it about 10 feet before the cops grabbed him. I pictured it, almost smiling despite myself. "And Rebecca?" Ben paused. His tone softened slightly. "She didn't move, Jake. Just stood there, staring at the bag, like it had betrayed her. Police took her too. They're both in custody now." I nodded, sinking onto the cushions, feeling the exhaustion finally starting to creep in. "Good," I said. That's what I wanted." Except it wasn't. Not entirely. I'd wanted her to come clean, to choose me, to choose us over whatever this was, but that ship had sailed so long ago, I probably just didn't see it leaving the harbor. Ben cleared his throat. "You okay, Jake? I mean, really okay?" I didn't answer right away. Just listened to the quiet hum of the fridge in the background. Was I okay? My wife had run off with another man, tried to steal from me, and now she was sitting in a jail cell in Montenegro. "I'll be fine," I said, finally. The words felt hollow. "Just need to see this through now." He didn't push, just said, "Get some sleep, man. We'll talk tomorrow." I hung up and tossed the phone onto the cushion next to me, my eyes drifting up to the ceiling. Sleep didn't come, though. I just lay there replaying the night, the party, the collapse, the way Rebecca's carefully constructed world had fallen apart in front of everyone. She'd worn that red dress like armor, thinking it would somehow carry her through, make her irresistible, make her plan work. But it couldn't save her from this. I'd known she was maybe a little too focused on money, on the high life, but I never ever thought she'd turn it on me. 3 years of marriage, and I'd missed it all. The lies, the planning, the quiet, subtle way she'd slipped out of my life while I was too busy building it, too busy thinking I was building it for us. The note in the bag wasn't just a taunt, it was closure. Now you can start from scratch, nothing. I'd written it half in anger, half hoping I'd never ever need to use it. Now it was her reality. I got up, restless, and wandered over to the hall closet, where the bag had been just a few days ago. It was empty now, just coats and a pair of her old sneakers she'd left behind. I shut the door harder than I meant to and went upstairs. The bedroom felt like a museum. Her side of the bed still smelled faintly of lavender. Her jewelry box was open on the dresser, a few pieces still inside. I didn't touch it. Didn't want to. Instead, I grabbed a blanket and headed back downstairs to the couch, curling up under it like I could somehow block out the entire world. The police would hold them. Ben had said the fake documents tied to the bag were enough to keep them there, for a while. Fraud. Attempted theft. Whatever charges stuck. It wasn't my job to decide that anymore. I just made sure they couldn't run from it. The living room was dark. The only sound was my own breathing. I thought about calling Harper, asking for more details, more of the ugly truth. But what was the point? I'd seen enough. Rebecca's face when she read the note, that was the image I'd carry. Not the woman I'd loved, but the one who had tried to break me completely. And Marcus, flailing like a fish as the cops closed in. He was nothing. Just a pawn she'd picked to play her game. They brought this on themselves, and I'd just let them. I closed my eyes, the blanket warm against my skin, and felt the first real wave of exhaustion hit. This wasn't the end. Not yet. But it was close. The public collapse was complete. And I'd orchestrated it all from this quiet house, thousands of miles away. Tomorrow I'd figure out what came next. For now, I just let the darkness take me. The echo of her voice finally starting to fade. I didn't sleep much that night, just drifted in and out on the couch, the blanket tangled around my legs. By the time the sun peeked through the blinds, I was already wide awake, just staring at the ceiling. Rebecca's face from the live feed was burned into my brain. Yeah, but Ben's call about her and Marcus being in custody, that had actually settled something in me. Not peace, not yet, but a kind of grim resolve. She'd tried to take everything. From me. Absolutely everything. And I'd just turned it right back on her. Now I had to face her one last time. A few days later, Ben arranged it. A meeting in a small, bare private office at a police station in Podgorica. You sure about this, Jake? He'd asked over the phone, his voice cautious. You don't owe her anything, you know. I'd nodded to myself, staring out the kitchen window back home. I know, I'd said. But I need to see her. Just need to hear what she says. Need to see her face. The flight to Montenegro felt like a blur. 10 hours of stale air, bad coffee, and my mind just churning the whole way. I landed in Podgorica late in the afternoon, the heat hitting me like a physical wall as I stepped off the plane. Ben met me at the airport, his suit a little wrinkled from traveling, but his grin was sharp as ever. "Man, you look like hell," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Feel like it too," I muttered, tossing my bag into his rental car. We drove straight to the station, the city flashing by outside the windows. Dusty streets, honking taxis, vendors shouting over each other. It didn't feel real, like I was somehow stuck inside someone else's story, someone else's bad movie. But this was mine. And Rebecca was waiting. The office was small, bare, gray concrete walls, a single metal table, 2 hard chairs. A guard brought her in. Her wrists were cuffed, her hair pulled back in a messy, unwashed ponytail. No makeup, no fancy red dress, just a plain, wrinkled white shirt and jeans. Her eyes looked hollow, empty. She didn't look like my Rebecca anymore. Not the woman who had kissed me goodnight just a week ago. She sat down across from me, the guard stepping back towards the door, and for a long, heavy moment we just stared at each other. You planned this?" she whispered finally, her voice cracking a little. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my face as steady as I possibly could. It took everything I had. "No," I said. The word felt heavy. "You did, Rebecca. This was all you." Her lips trembled, and she looked down at the metal table, her fingers twisting together, picking at each other. "Jake, I didn't mean to." I cut her off, sharper than I probably intended to, but I couldn't listen to it. Don't try to explain it now, Rebecca." She flinched, and I saw the tears starting to well up in her eyes. "Marcus, he manipulated me," she said, her voice rising, sounding a little desperate. "He said we could start over, that you didn't care anymore. I made a mistake, Jake. I swear I did." I almost laughed again. It was so absurd, so predictable. But the sound caught in my throat, bitter and hard. "A mistake?" I repeated, keeping my voice low and even. "You wrote me a note, Rebecca. You took the bag and ran. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice." She shook her head, tears spilling freely down her face now, but I just couldn't buy it. I'd seen her cry before, knew exactly how she could turn on the waterworks when she needed to, how she could use them to try and twist things. I slid 2 simple folders across the table, the papers rustling loudly in the quiet room. "Here's where we're at," I said, my tone flat, devoid of any emotion I could control. "One's a plea deal. House arrest, you cooperate fully. You return what you took. You testify against Marcus. The other is prison. A long time. Pick one, her." Hand shook visibly as she reached for the folders, flipping open the plea deal first. She stared at the page for a long moment, then looked up at me, her eyes wide, her face pale under the tears. You You knew all along, she said, almost to herself, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. I just nodded. Slow, deliberate, letting the truth sink in. I trusted you, Rebecca, I said, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. I loved you, and you decided to cash out. I just didn't let you cash in. She dropped the folder back onto the table like it was suddenly burning her fingers, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders started shaking, real deep sobs racking her body. I'm so sorry, she sobbed, the words muffled by her hands. I didn't mean for it to end like this. I wanted to believe her. Part of me, the old part, the fool part, wanted to feel something. Anger, pity, anything. But I was just numb, empty. You didn't mean to get caught, I said, standing up slowly. That's the difference, Rebecca. That's the only difference. She looked up at me again, her face streaked with tears, raw and exposed. And for just a second, just a flicker, I saw the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, beautiful, completely lost. But I knew it wasn't real. Not anymore. Not the way it used to be. Why? I asked, the question just slipping out before I could stop it, before I could tell myself not to bother. Why did you do it, Rebecca? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, taking a shaky, ragged breath. I felt trapped, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You were always working, always gone. Marcus, he saw me. He listened. I thought I could have something new, something different. I clenched my jaw, her words hitting harder than I expected them to, even now. You could have talked to me, I said, my voice tight. You could have said something. Instead, you stole from me. You tried to take everything. She didn't have an answer for that. Just sat there, staring at the two folders on the table like they were suddenly her entire future. Which, I guess, they were. I turned to the guard, giving him a small nod to let him know I was done. She's quick, I said over my shoulder, not looking back at her. I'm not waiting around. She called my name as the door opened, a soft, broken sound. But I didn't look back. The hall outside was narrow, the air thick with dust and the faint, unpleasant smell of the station. Ben was waiting by the exit, leaning against the wall, looking tired but alert. How'd it go? He asked, falling into step beside me as we walked. Out into the blinding sunlight of the street. She cried, I said. Stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sudden brightness making my eyes hurt. Blamed Marcus, said she was sorry. He snorted. Figures. You buy it? I shook my head, not even hesitating. Not for a second. We climbed into the car, the leather seats hot from the sun, and Ben started the engine. She'll take the plea, he said, pulling out onto the road. Her lawyers are already sniffing around. Marcus is toast either way. He's got prior, no leverage, at all. I just stared out the window, the city blurring past as we drove away from the station. Good, I muttered. Let them sort it out. Ben glanced over at me, his hands relaxed on the wheel. You didn't have to come here, you know, he said, quietly. Could have just let me handle it, signed off remotely. I shrugged, leaning my head back against the seat. Needed to see her, I said. Needed to know why, to hear it from her. He didn't push, didn't ask anything else, just drove. The low hum of the engine filling the silence between us. I thought about her excuse. Feeling trapped, ignored. Maybe there was some twisted truth in it. I had been buried in the merger, coming home late, probably brushing off her complaints more often than I should have. But that couldn't justify this. She'd had a choice. And she picked Marcus. She picked the bag. She picked the lie over me. Seeing her in that room, broken and desperate, didn't change that. It just made it real. I had trusted her with everything, my heart, my life, and she'd just thrown it back in my face like it was garbage. The confrontation wasn't about forgiveness. Not for me. It was about closing the door, slamming it shut. Back at the hotel, I stood on the balcony, the city sprawling out below me, lights starting to flicker on in the dusk. Rebecca was still in that cell, probably signing the plea deal right now. Marcus was done, his big talk landing. Him nowhere but a prison cell. And me? I was here. Alone. But not empty. I'd given her the chance to come clean, and she lied to my face again. That was enough. I took a deep breath, the warm, humid air filling my lungs, and felt a little bit of the weight start to lift. Just a little. Tomorrow, I'd fly home. Leave this whole messy chapter behind. For now, anyway. I watched the skyline, felt the end of this part of the story, and knew that I would walk away from this stronger than she ever would. I landed back in the States 2 days later, the jet lag hitting me like a truck as I stepped off the plane into the gray drizzle of the airport back home. Montenegro felt like a fever dream now. Podgorica, Rebecca's tear-streaked face, the cold police station office, all of it already starting to fade into the background as I dragged my bag through the terminal. Ben had stayed behind to wrap up, the last of the legal loose ends, promising to keep me posted, but I was done with that part. I'd faced her, heard her excuses, and left her to her fate. Now it was time to start picking up the pieces of my own life, starting with the one thing she hadn't touched, the real $15 million, and the merger that had started this whole mess in the first place. The drive home was quiet. The radio was off, just the sound of the rain tapping against the windshield. The house looked the same as when I'd left it. Empty. Still a little too big for just one person. But I didn't linger on that thought. I just dropped my bag in the hall and headed straight downtown to the office. Miller and Hayes Investments was buzzing when I walked in. The team was still riding the high of the merger, the successful closing. David, my head of finance, spotted me first, his grin wide as he waved me over. "Jake, man of the hour, thought you'd be halfway to a beach somewhere by now." I forced a smile, shaking his hand. "Not yet, David. Got some loose ends to tie up first." He didn't ask about Rebecca. Word had spread, I guessed. And honestly, I was grateful for that. I spent the morning finalizing the deal details, signing the last few papers, shaking hands with the board members. The $15 million was already moved, safe in an investment account I'd set up weeks ago, long before Rebecca even knew what was coming. It wasn't just about keeping it out of her reach. It was about what came next. I'd been kicking around an idea for months, something bigger than the merger, something that felt like it could actually outlast all this pain and mess. By noon, I called a meeting with the core team. David, Harper, a few others, and I laid it all out for them. "We're starting the Miller Foundation," I said, standing at the head of the conference table, using $10 million of the merger funds as seed money. It's going to focus on entrepreneurs from tough backgrounds, people who wouldn't otherwise get a shot. Give them a real chance. The room went quiet for a second. Then David nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "Wow, Jake. That's big. Real big." Harper, who had flown in that morning straight from wrapping things up with Ben and the police in Montenegro, leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed, her eyes still sharp despite the travel. "I like it," she said. "Keeps the cash working. Doing some good. Not just sitting there. You're head of security for the foundation," I told her, pointing a finger her way. "No one better at sniffing out trouble before it starts." She smirked, tipping her head. "Damn right. I'm in." David volunteered to handle the financials, setting up the accounts, the legal structure. By the end of the day, we had a skeleton plan. Grants, mentorships, a real chance to change things for people. It felt good, solid, like I was actually building something that Rebecca couldn't possibly tear down. Ben called that evening, his voice crackling a little over the line. Plea deals signed. Rebecca's on house arrest, some apartment in Nebraska of all places. I was on the couch back home, a glass of water in my hand, the TV muted in the background. "Nebraska?" I asked, frowning a little. "What's she doing there?" Ben chuckled. "Rehab program, part of the deal. Guess she's trying to clean up her act." I just nodded, not really surprised. "And the villa crowd? The investors?" He paused. "They're pissed, yeah, but no charges against you. The documents were fake. Nothing ties back. You're clean, Jake. Completely." I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding on to. "Good. Thanks, Ben. For everything." "Hey, any time, man," he said. "Oh, and you're on the board for the foundation, by the way." My arm was easily twisted. He laughed, loud and real, this time. Why wouldn't I be? The next few weeks were a blur. Meetings, press releases announcing the foundation, the slow, steady grind of actually getting it off the ground. The team rebuilt the brand around it, spinning the merger's success into a story of growth and giving. Back. I threw myself into it completely, staying late at the office, avoiding the house as much as I could. It wasn't just about work anymore. It was about finding my footing again. Rebecca's betrayal had shaken me to my core, left me questioning everything I thought I knew. But this was mine. No lies, no games, just something real. Something I could build that couldn't be stolen. Harper's team locked down the security protocols for the foundation. Ben handled the legal side, the paperwork, the compliance, and I just kept pushing forward. One step at a time. One night I stayed late at the office again, the city lights sparkling through the huge windows. The place was empty, just me and a stack of the first grant applications from potential recipients. Kids from tough neighborhoods with incredible ideas, just needing a chance. I read through them, scribbling notes, feeling a spark of something I hadn't felt in months. This was why I'd fought so hard. Not just to beat Rebecca, not just to protect the money, but to get here. I didn't hate her anymore. Not really. She had exposed herself, shown me exactly who she really was. And I had used it. Used the energy, the pain, the lesson, to build something better. The mirror I'd held up to her in Montenegro wasn't about revenge in the end. It was about clarity. For both of us, I guess. I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms over my head, and caught my reflection in the dark glass of the window. I looked tired. Older, maybe, but steady. That was enough. The house still felt a little strange when I got home. Too quiet. Still a little too full of her ghost, I guess. I'd boxed up her stuff, shoved it all into the garage, but I hadn't touched the big things yet. The bed, the dresser, the life we'd shared within those walls. I didn't need to rush it, for now I was living in the present, not the past. The foundation was my focus, my peace. I cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just some pasta and sauce, and ate it on the couch, the TV on low, just for some background noise. The news ticker scrolled across the bottom of the screen, mentioning the merger, a quick little blurb about the new initiative. Miller and Hayes launches foundation to support underserved entrepreneurs. I smiled. Small, but real. Rebecca hadn't taken this from me. In a weird, messed up way, she'd actually pushed me to it. I thought about her in Nebraska, locked in some apartment, staring at bland walls instead of villa views. Did she regret it? Did she see the deep hole she dug for herself? I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't need to know anymore. She was out of my story now. A chapter closed. The foundation. That was my future. Hers was whatever she made of it now. I finished my pasta, set the plate in the sink, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. The cold bottle felt good in my hand, grounding me. I stepped out onto the back porch, the night air cool and crisp against my skin, and looked up at the stars. They were faint, dimmed by the city lights, but they were there, like me, still standing, still shining, even after everything. The phone stayed quiet that night. No calls, no updates, just me and the quiet hum of the house, the steady rhythm of a life I was actively rebuilding. I didn't chase the what-ifs anymore. Didn't wonder about her and Marcus. They'd lost, and I'd won. Not by tearing them down, but by rising above it. The Miller Foundation was proof of that. A legacy bigger than her betrayal. I took a slow sip of the beer, the bitterness fading into something smoother, and just let the night settle around me. This was my peace, hard-earned, and mine alone. I was at the office late again, the glow of my desk lamp cutting through the dark as I sifted through another stack of grant applications for the Miller Foundation. It had been months now since Montenegro, since Rebecca's collapse and the launch of this whole new chapter, and I'd settled into a rhythm. Work, home, repeat. The house didn't feel quite so empty anymore. I'd started filling it with new things. A comfortable chair here, a piece of art there, like I was slowly, deliberately, claiming it back as just mine. That night, though, something broke the routine. I got home around 9, the air crisp with the start of fall, and found a letter in the mailbox. No return address, just my name, in her handwriting, Rebecca's. My stomach tightened instantly as I carried it inside, dropping my keys onto the counter. I stood there for a minute just staring at it, before finally tearing it open. Inside was a single page. Her words were slanted and messy, like she'd written it quickly, maybe not wanting to dwell on it. Jake, it started. I don't expect you to read this, but I hope you do. I'm in Nebraska, at a rehab program. House arrest ends next month. You were right. I hit rock bottom. Marcus is gone, locked up, and I'm here, figuring out who I am. Without him, without you. Thanks for not saving me. It made me try. There was no signature, just a small, familiar silver ring tucked into the envelope. The one I'd given her on our first anniversary. Simple, plain, engraved, with our initials. I held it between my fingers, the metal cool against my skin, and sat down hard on the couch. The TV was off. The house was silent, and all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. I read the letter again, slower this time, trying to feel something. anger, relief, anything. But it was like pressing on a bruise that had already faded completely. She was in Nebraska, in rehab, alone, no villa, no Marcus, no grand escape, just her, and the absolute mess she'd made. "Thanks for not saving me," she'd written, and I wondered if she actually meant it. I hadn't saved her, not from the cops, not from herself, but I hadn't tried to completely crush her either. I'd just let her fall. Let the full heavy weight of her choices hit her. Maybe that was the push she needed. Or maybe it was just words. Another performance. Another attempt to try and tug at me. To make me feel something I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't care enough to figure it out. The ring caught the light as I turned it over in my fingers. The tiny J and S etched inside, glinting faintly. I remembered giving it to her. Dinner at that little Italian place downtown, her laughing as I slid it onto her finger. "Forever," she'd said, her eyes bright with a future I believed in. Forever didn't last very long at all. I stood up, walking over to the safe in my office. A small vault I'd had installed after the merger was finalized. I opened it. The ring went inside, next to some old business contracts and a stack of cash I kept there for emergencies. Not out of nostalgia, not because I couldn't let go, but because it belonged in the past. Locked away with everything else. I shut the door. The click was loud in the quiet room, and I felt the finality of it settle in. Closure? Not for her, maybe, but for me. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and stepped out onto the back porch. The night was cool and still. The stars were clearer out here, away from the city's haze, and I leaned against the railing, letting the cold bottle sweat in my hand. Rebecca thought she'd won when she took that bag. Thought she'd outsmarted me completely with Marcus and their big plans, and I had just let her believe it. Just long enough to watch it all unravel spectacularly. The last laugh wasn't loud or cruel. It was quiet, steady, mine. She'd lost everything she'd tried to steal. Her freedom, her future, even him. And I had come out of it stronger. The Miller Foundation was proof of that, humming along, changing lives. While she sat in some drab apartment in Nebraska, trying to piece hers back together. I took a sip of the beer. The bitterness was sharp on my tongue for a second, then faded into something resigned. I thought about how it had all played out. The decoy bag, the GPS, Harper's fake profiles, Ben's legal maneuvering. All of it had worked like clockwork. She'd opened that bag at the villa so utterly sure she'd hit the jackpot, and found my note instead. "Now you can start from scratch with nothing." I hadn't written it to gloat. Not really. I'd written it to end it. And it had. Marcus was in prison. His cocky grin locked behind bars. And Rebecca was in rehab, her charm useless against the cold, hard reality she had built for herself. I didn't need to chase them. Didn't need to scream or fight anymore. I just stepped back and let them fall. And that was the real victory. The porch creaked under my feet as I shifted, looking out at the yard. Dark, a little overgrown, neglected since she left. I'd get to it eventually. Maybe plant something new in the spring. The foundation was my focus now, yeah, but the house could be a part of it too. A fresh start. Not from scratch, like she'd wished me, but from strength. I'd rebuilt the company, turned the merger into something bigger, something that mattered, and I'd rebuild this too. Rebecca's letter didn't change that. It was just a footnote, a last quiet whisper from a life I had firmly left behind. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. She'd shown me who she was, and I had shown her who I could be. That was enough. I finished the beer, the bottle empty in my hand, and went back inside, locking the door behind me. The letter stayed on the counter. The ring was safe in the vault, and I headed upstairs. The bedroom didn't feel like hers anymore. I'd swapped the sheets, moved the furniture around, made it feel like mine. I climbed into bed, the mattress firm under me, and closed my eyes. Sleep came easier these days. The weight of her betrayal felt lighter with every step I took forward. The foundation was growing, applications were pouring in, and I had a team: Ben, Harper, David, people I could actually trust. Keeping it real. Rebecca was out there, starting over, with nothing, just like I'd promised. I didn't need to save her, didn't need to punish her. She'd done that herself. The next morning, I'd wake up, make coffee, head to the office. Life would go on. Steady. Sure. The last laugh wasn't about her losing. It was about me winning. Not with vengeance, but with purpose. I'd let her think she'd taken it all. Let her run with that illusion of victory. And when it crashed and burned, I was already here. Building something better. The ring in the vault. The letter on the counter. They were relics, not regrets. I rolled over, the darkness soft around me, and just let it go. She'd lost everything she stole. And I had gained everything she couldn't possibly touch. That was the end of it, and I was good with that. Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more deep and meaningful stories.